Hi, everyone. It's Matt Stranick and my awesome colleague over here.
Dan Hayward.
Right, we're reporting to you from Kamloops, BC, and Halifax-ish for Dan, if not Halifax
Yeah.
proper.
Halifax enough.
I'm like, who do you pay your bills? Who do you pay your sewer and water to?
Oh,
No.
definitely to City of Halifax, but I mean that
Okay.
also
So you're HRM. Is
exactly.
that
Oh yeah. Oh no, we're definitely HRM. I mean,
rocking in
I
HRM? Okay, that's.
I lived at 8 or 9 years ago. I lived probably like a good 45-minute, 50-minute drive outside the city, and was still and was still well within HRM at that time, even though it was well
Well,
water and that sort of deal.
I have not spent nearly enough time in the HRM, man. I just got to put
Mm.
it out there. But thank you to everybody who has thus far viewed the episode 0 episode.
Hmm.
So I guess, Dan, this makes this episode 1, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
technically episode 1.
You want to say what it's about here? Because you came up with it right around, you pitched them both the topics at the same
Yeah.
time, and they were both immediately very cool. So why don't you
Hmm.
just tell us what it's all about here, bud?
Yeah. Well, my thoughts on this. The topic is 5 bands that changed your life for better or worse. And these are all, I know my list in particular, it's all artists that had, some degree of an effect. I think, some degree of an effect on my life, or just sort of, listen, use their music as sort of some sort of a direction to follow, or just like the general experience of the artist. Um, at some point during my life. And it goes from say early, even like junior high years up through like my list goes through yeah, through from junior high through to my early 30s, just sort of at different points. Though I realized there's one arc, sort of the little arc in the middle that's like the 3 punk bands involved. And it's not going to go too much into it, but I realized it's like, oh yeah, that seems like such a long span of time, but it's like less than the length of time I've been at my current job. But
It's funny how just your perspective on time even changes, right? If you think about like the neurochemistry or whatever behind that, it's like, literally, it's a quantity that, alters as you get older. Like it's science and stuff. So
exactly.
no, man, that's awesome. And I think why your topic of 5 bands that resonated with you, resonated with me as a topic, is just the exactly the experiential aspect of it you're speaking to. And I'm sorry if I sort of throw some of my friggin' educator jargon into this, but I'm just like it's kind of for me. It's just like, yeah, man, why did I fall into all that?
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to say that all 5 of mine are punk bands, and that's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the most white bread middle-aged thing I can possibly embody at this point, I suppose. I am going for as many stereotypes as I can, including,
Yeah.
admittedly, what at this point is a dad rock list. I consider this a solid dad rock list.
Yeah.
So if you're like 35 to 50, and you've led a certain kind of life, and now you're leading this other, more domesticated thing. This is the stuff that might land. At least it did with me. So again, without too much further preamble, Dan, I also have to give a shout out to when I saw Dan's notes for this. I immediately saw at least a few there, and I'm like, yeah, goddamn friggin' right. So why don't we? Did you put these? Did you put these like in a specific chronological order in terms of, or not chronological order, but like order in terms of impact for you, or
It's
1 through 5? How did you come up with the ranking system? I guess for yours.
for mine. It wasn't so much a ranking system. I just sort of took it was 5 bands that sort of resonated with me at particular times.
Okay. So it wasn't like one's like the most ultimate, the second is like the second most ultimate, because that's kind of how I did mine.
Yeah.
So Okay, well, why don't we I again, I'm new to this whole rap music genre, in any kind of meaningful way.
Yeah.
So I saw this at the top of your list. I'm like, do tell. So why
All
don't you
right.
tell us about it here, bud?
So yeah, my first sort of band that helped make me, for better or worse, is De La Soul,
Okay.
who they're from I think it's Staten Island, New York, somewhere. I think yeah, I'm terrible now that I can't remember. I believe it's Staten Island. They're from
New,
the
new,
same area that the Wu-Tang is from.
that's Staten Island. I
Yeah,
can
Staten
vouch for
Island.
that. That's
That they're just
yeah.
these three kind of like, misfit dudes who all met in detention in high school and started a rap group together. And they ended up also through that they started a collective called the Native Tongues. That was them. Eventually the Tribe Called Quest joined another group called the Jungle Brothers, Queen Latifah, and just several other artists like that.
That's a
All
solid
became a part
crew,
of this.
man. That's a
Yeah,
solid
and this was all
team.
kind of like, late 80s.
Can I just barge in and ask if this is considered then alternative rap?
That's just it. That's just
Okay.
it. Because the thing I'd say, the way that De La Soul really influenced me when I was young, I first heard them in junior high school. It's like me and my nerdy friends would all get together to play Nintendo, would then like watch videotapes of Rap City from Much Music.
Rap
And
City with Master T. Did
yes.
Master T? Yes.
Yes. And with Michael Williams hosting before that.
Right.
But anyways, De La Soul were guests on there a couple of times anyways. But yeah, they were just kind of like like I said, they're a little more kind of like early alternative hip hop.
Okay.
And the album that I sort of took two tracks from, 3 Feet High and Rising, it was made around the same time as Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys. And they kind of had a like Pet Sounds White Album competition going on. And one of the reasons I had to use YouTube links is because this album's not commercially available anymore, nor is most of their catalog, because it was also sample heavy. That the clearance contracts, like the sample clearance deals that their old record label used, were not the greatest. And
not considered sustainable over the long term in terms of the company that would have to put out the money for it relative to the revenue that said artist would be likely to generate. Yeah, I got
exactly. So they just their music isn't commercially available anymore. One song was in the credits of the Spider-Man movie that came out last year, Spider-Man No Way Home.
Okay.
The song The Magic Number, that the official songwriting credits go to the people who had the license to the song from Schoolhouse Rock that that was sampled heavily. But still, like, that's the only song of theirs you can really find from that era. But they were kind of like the first music who kind of seemed like artists who kind of seemed like weirdos who didn't quite fit in. When I was someone who felt like a weirdo that didn't quite fit in, going to Devon Junior High in the late 80s, where everyone was either wearing a new Metallica shirt that they bought when they played in Moncton, or their parents' hand-me-down AC/DC shirt.
Shout out to Devon Junior High.
Then it was like
and Northside Fredericton. Yeah.
Exactly. And it was just like this, and I kind of I just wasn't into metal at all when I was that age.
It was I guess it was tough. I was similarly, shall we say, disaffected within the junior high years. Here in BC, they got, from what I can tell, at least my part of BC, they got friggin' just like, you do like kindergarten until grade 7, and then grade 8 to high school. It's this other thing. And I understand that's more common. Like the junior high school experience, I don't know, man. I didn't necessarily dig my time at Albert Street Junior High.
Oh yeah,
felt pretty, But at the same time, that sense of disaffectedness led me to the shit that is awesome now, which you have just alluded to. So I'm giving you some sympathy from the south side of Fredericton, friend. That's
But yeah, like as a North Sider at that time, this was kind of like the most, the weirdest thing that that seemed like, the most different from
No,
most of the
totally.
people that I
Like
went to
on
school with.
so many different
And
levels. I can imagine
yeah,
that, right?
and
Um,
like it it kind of, as I mentioned in my notes, it kind of led, it was the first thing that like with it led to the first times that I tried to like express my own personal style given like the clothes that my parents bought for me, which led to, which was basically like when I'd get sent to go get a haircut at the barber, I would have like, squirreled away some of my allowance money from the last little while so that I could give it to the barber to say like, hey, look, you don't have to call my parents and ask if it's okay if you to like shave all these lines in the side of my head. It's fine. It's cool. And they'd be like, thanks for the $4, kid, in
Note, note,
1989.
note, note, note to millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah.
At one point in the late '80s and into the '90s, carving stuff into your head with a
Yeah.
razor was considered vaguely cool for a
Yeah. And
certain
it was
period of
like
time. That's
the closest that
yeah.
I could, it's just like as a kid from from like the north side who was just kind of trying to make up their own identity at age whatever. Like that was the closest I could get to it. And this was sort of, they were my first favorite band that I could say was like my favorite band that was something I discovered.
Yeah, totally. Well, man, that is awesome. And that I mean, I know the name, and I'm going to be
Hmm.
grateful here to to actually check out the links that you provided. Are you putting together some kind of list for this one, Dan, in your notes here,
I've
or
got
you?
in the show notes document, I have a couple of tracks from
Okay,
each artist.
good,
Uh,
good, good.
both both song. I figured I'd go with two songs off the same
Yeah,
release. For
awesome.
each of the five artists.
No, that's rad. No, and again, the reference there to Paul's Boutique. I mean, man, I got the again in terms of my like hip hop initiation or whatever.
Hmm.
That's one of the first ones I went for. I got the 30th anniversary edition or whatever, and I'm just like, that's actually one of the records that sort
Hmm.
of made me question like, is this even friggin' music as such? You know, I didn't include it in any of this because I mean, just because. But
Hmm.
it's like when you mention favorably, a comparison or a Staten Island, New York City kind of thing. There, I'm just like, I think I know what that means now a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well,
Patting
this.
myself on the back here. So
Yeah. I kind of put it together that the members of like both the members of De La Soul and some of the members of Wu Tang are around the same age, and
well, and
there's
so
references. There've been references to like kind of seeing each other around at school, and the music video for one of the songs that I picked, Me, Myself, and I, it's
okay.
them in detention with these other kind of like bigger dudes from their school, kind of like, you know, shoving them around a bit for looking weird, and it's just like that could be the guys from the Wu Tang bullying them.
And I like the shout out there you gave to Tribe Called Quest because I mean,
Yep.
again, in terms of stuff that I just immediately gravitated towards this
Hmm.
year without knowing necessarily why. I'm
Yeah.
just like, yep, this is the good stuff right here, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
well, man, that is rad. And again, just to that's friggin' sick, and there's so many
Yeah.
good things to follow up on. The first one for mine, which comes as friggin' notes, and I'm just if I sort of glance over here because I'm like scrolling through the notes, like what the even did I friggin' put down for this? Um, this will come as no surprise to anybody who's met me for more than probably an hour or two, depending on the relationship. For me, the replacements are like, I mean, it's like I put, you can't see it. I don't even know if my Christmas tree is going to make it into the final cut for this video, but I have a Christmas tree. I paid $16 at the dollar store nearby for a pair of Kiss socks, right? Kiss Good Luck socks. And I told the clerk, I'm like, this is the single most expensive item I've ever paid for at your store by far. He's just like, yeah, thank you. Give me your money now. And it's on my tree. I don't even think I'm ever going to take the packaging off it because To me, that would almost violate the item somehow. So that's a metaphor, like for people who are like obsessed with Kiss. You know, I was reading like about Pantera. Dan, what do you think of this Pantera reunion that's coming up? Do you have any opinions about this? Do you care about Pantera?
I'm not a big Pantera fan, honestly.
Neither am I. But they're
Yeah.
opening for Metallica.
Oh, really?
When Metallica tours this year, and Metallica is touring behind a new album, and they're playing in Montreal. And I think I may force myself to go, because that's how much I would value that. But anyway, Dimebag Darrell and his brother Vinnie Paul were both buried in Kiss caskets. Right?
Oh, really?
Donated by Gene Simmons. So
I just need to. I don't mean to cut you off here, but my dog is kind of freaking out at the door, so I'll be back in just a second to open the door for him.
Dope. So this is all the roundabout way of saying that some people are utterly, utterly enamored and obsessed with certain bands, and for me, that happens to be the Replacements. And I can't even, so I'm not even gonna like try and speak to it at any level other than I'm the most ridiculous fan ever of this band. And I can legitimately say, like, it's like I'm a quasi-academic person, and somewhat in my life, Dan, or have been. And I could even go so far as to say, yeah, if you set out these key criteria for like vital, powerful rock music, they meet every friggin' one, and then some. And it depends, right? Like I'm late Gen X. I consider myself late tail end of Gen X. So probably, the way the boomers experienced the Rolling Stones or something like that, I guess that can only, that's the closest analogy I can think of, just to like, it's like, to me, it's this vital, visceral, unapologetically weird, unapologetically loud, unapologetically sensitive friggin' punk music that evolved, from every album to the point that they are now, we're talking 40 plus years later, just troving, the archives and putting out reissues every year, live albums. They did just enough of a reunion between 2013 and 2015 to fucking make all the money that they need to probably not have to. It's a dog break, man. Go for it.
All right. Dealt with.
All good, man.
Yeah.
Dogs and babies. That's just like, if I ever get a text message and it's just like dog or baby thing, I'm just like, okay, this takes priority right now. So
yeah, he managed to be on the wrong side of multiple doors. So yeah, happens
to all of us. Happens to me all the time. And this is a small friggin' apartment. So
yeah.
So I guess that's probably anything I've just previously said. All I'm gonna say is, like, it's easy to get all gooey-eyed and sentimental about a band such as this, and I fully recognize that. But I can also say, just in terms of their friggin' weird, belligerent, self-sabotaging hijinks, they were just, it's like utter self-deprecating fuckery, mixed in a lot of cases with severe alcoholism and drug addiction. They're from Minnesota. Winter is forever long there. And, speaking of people who cram themselves indoors and like try and invent things to do, I just, as the maritime people, I think are pretty good at that. So I think there's some resonance there. So I guess that's all I really want to, say about it. I got some other stuff in the notes. Now I'm just going up here through yours, dude. And
the next,
I've never heard of this one at all. So please go on it. That's
all right. Yeah. So my second pick was 7 Seconds, specifically the album "The Crew" by 7 Seconds.
Okay.
They're a band from Reno, Nevada. They started, I think, in like the late 70s. The Crew is from can't remember what year it is in the early 80s, but it was like, they're a band that they started out kind of like as a hardcore band with a bit of melody, and then more melody came in, and then more melody came in, and then by the time their third album came out, in the liner notes, at the end of it, Kevin, their singer, is writing, "Yeah, man, and there's this band U2 that I just heard from Ireland that you should all really check out. I think they're going to be the future, man." And then they just sort of everything sort of took, just yeah, like their their style definitely took a turn like through the late 80s and early 90s, but they're still like, they did a reunion tour this year. They were part of the big tour that Off did. It was them, Off, Negative Approach, and 7 Seconds, where there were a
Man,
ton of memes like hanging out with the kids at the hardcore show, and it's a bunch of 60-year-olds like with like faded tattoos all like standing there, and like Kevin Seconds, kind of like the singer from 7 Seconds, now kind of looks like, you know a chunky Willie Nelson. Um, and the rest of the band all just look like bikers. But the crew, they were young and fresh-faced teenagers from Reno, Nevada, and they were, I guess, a straight edge band, but they weren't as like, you know, like they were more of a positive band. Like there was a whole subset of hardcore that they refer to as posicore. Uh, that was a whole thing through the late 80s, early 90s, and beyond. And 7 Seconds were kind of a precursor to that. Because, as much as they have songs about like wanting to fight and like doing graffiti and like wanting to, smash the system and fight racism and that sort of thing, they also had songs about how it's great to be able to trust someone. And that kind of thing. And one of their big anthems is called Walk Together, Rock Together, about how, even though there's differences, like somebody might be a skinhead or they might be like into drinking and you're not into drinking, you can all find common ground, if you're part of the scene or whatever. But like, they were a band that I heard probably, I think I was like 15 years when I was first getting involved with like that high school radio station that we mentioned in the last episode. Um, because I was doing a lunchtime shift, and one of the only punk rockers from Devon that I knew came in, who was a girl that was like a couple years older than me, that like even, when we were younger, always kind of, was a little
I think I'm trying.
more eccentric.
Mentally. I'm trying to guess who you're referring to. I think I may have a couple of good,
Yeah.
good clues,
But
but
anyways,
anyway, that's
yeah. Anyways, this person, like, I was still pretty new to getting into the scene at that point. And in my notes, I mentioned how like, like when you're young and you don't have a lot of access to get into like the more obscure music, you end up picking like your favorite old punk band that's like your favorite sports team. Like there were like the Misfits guys and the Minor
good.
Threat guys
Good
and the
analogy, man. That's
yeah, it's like that kind of thing. And I just never really like at that time, most of the stuff I'd heard from Black Flag was stuff that they played on CHSR from the one live album where there's like the interlude talking about dick size. And I was just like, I don't know if that's really for me. And like, Minor Threat I was into, but not every song. And, the Misfits, I remember there was like, a crew of guys just like cosplayed Danzig daily. That I would see around, but I just like I couldn't get into that.
Lots of serious Misfits and Danzig bands
Exactly,
in and
but
around
like just
Fredericton, man.
as
I gotta say,
as like a young person who's kind of getting into the punk scene at that point, none of that stuff really like super spoke to me.
resonated. It
But
never
like
spoke to you. Yeah.
7 Seconds kind of hit that nice balance of like angry but like awkwardly sincere. That just and this album was kind of when it hit that perfect balance. Like everything else sort of started tilting, like they're exploring other forms of music, which is fine. I think that's great. I think if you can do it, like when I played in bands, I mostly played the same kind of music just because I wasn't very good and it was easy to go da na 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 na.
You were still like in training mode though. You were still
exactly, and
yeah.
I just kind of moved on to other forms of expression later on.
Exactly.
Yeah, but anyways, they were kind of that perfect like awkward angry teen band for me at a certain time. That just like for years afterwards, that was still like my ritual was like that was my morning coffee record was the Crew. because everything was just kind of like
I had that kind of thing.
yeah.
Every morning of grade 12, I woke up and listened to Fuck School by the Replacements.
Mhm.
And before I went to school. And then when I had a show at the CFHS, I also got to. I think your sister and I had the same show, and some other person, and that was like our theme song. I convinced them to let that be our theme song. So angry, positive music first thing in the morning. I totally grab you there. And just because I've already started barging on your thing, I'll just say one last connection that I made with what you just said. The hardcore, like looking admirably at U2 thing, like that's basically why Minor Threat ended, as I've heard it. Like Brian Baker and the Nelson or whoever, they wanted to play like more melodic, like nee kind of chords, while still, and Ian was just like not having it. So that, basically that was the end of their thing. And for what it's worth, Paul Westerberg, apparently he saw friggin' like 1980, like their first tour, U2, they landed and then they played in, North America. They played in Minneapolis. And according to Tommy Stinson, the bass player, he was just blown away. So let's not write out completely U2, even though they're a fucking caricature now. Don't write them out totally from the early punk and post-punk equation. That's all,
Exactly.
Anyways, dude, I totally stole it from you. So sorry.
I was going to just say, as a quick postscript to that, at my current job, I had a coworker for quite a few years who, is somebody that's been like a big part of the scene, the hardcore scene here, especially like he's like basically was like Mr. Straight Edge for Halifax. And his band at the time, and it's like, we worked this office job together.
Can you tell me the name of the band? I'm dying to know. Don't say it if you don't want to.
Yeah, no. Well, he was in a couple bands. He was in a band called Envision. The band I was going to talk about, actually, I was referring to specifically, was Envision, the band that he sang for. With like several different lineups, but they always cover. It's like Ian, somebody that's like, or this coworker, somebody that's like a couple years older than me.
Yeah.
But like, we'd still kind of be like, hey, bud, remember? We'd always jokingly like put together little lists like this. Be like, hey, top 5 bands to Chicago. Let me know by your coffee break, and like pop by each other's desks and like, have those kind of little quick chats. But anyways, this band that he sang for would always cover the song "Young Till I Die." Which is one of the songs, 7-second songs that I linked to add to the YouTube playlist. And it's just like all these dudes in their 30s and 40s wearing like sweaters at the show. Could move from the back up to the front, be like, "I'm gonna stay young until." Oh yeah, that's the other thing about 7 seconds. They're big into the "whoa whoa whoa" chorus.
Love the whoa
all
whoa
the
whoa
all the old folks move to the front for that one song to like do like whoa.
Well, man, you convinced me, and not that I even needed convincing. And I've heard of these dudes before. And actually, just one more sort of connection that I thought of while you were speaking is that actually Kevin Seconds did like a sort of, he did a joint record, him and Matt Skiba, the singer for Alkaline Trio, back in like 2002 or 2003. I tried to order it from Amazon and it didn't arrive, so I never got to hear it. I'm sure it's YouTubeable. But if you're talking about like the whoa 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 chorus, and you're talking like big choruses and like like I'm mad but I'm positive as well. I mean, that whole thing. I mean, the Hold Steady has referenced the blah 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 blah, and the early 7 seconds taught me some of life's most important lessons or most valuable lessons. I mean, Greg Finn is, a fan. Like, anyway, man, that's all legit.
Yeah,
and
that was pretty much what I had for that album.
No, man, and that is
for
dope.
That artist.
That is completely dope. And I see your next one, and I'm just like, almost like, can we just go to the next one? But because I have personal remembrances of that from St. Charbel's and other venues in Fredericton. But
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get to that. I'll just say for my next one, again, like in a lot of cases, what I have this year or for this episode kind of overlaps with the previous episode. So for me, I mean, Leatherface is just again, it's sort of like, you know, it's easy to get kind of like um, the term escapes me now, but like when you make a myth out of something to the point that it's no longer real, that's kind of what Leatherface sort of became. For me, I mean, I got into him at exactly the same time as Hot Water Music. So it was sort of like, for me, late 90s, South End Halifax. And I'm going to give credit to, Gumby. You know Gumby.
Good old Gumby.
Anyone who's watching this might know Gumby, but Gumby's brother Ben, right? Ben McFarlane, who just had this early friggin' prodigious friggin' interest in all of this stuff. And you just sort of throw out stuff like, oh yeah, there's Poison Idea. Like, okay, thanks. I never even friggin' knew, but whatever. And Turbo Negro, that's another one I got to attribute to him. And yeah, I'm gonna give credit to Gumby's brother Ben for getting me onto Leatherface. And I guess by default, Hot Water Music, because my first experience with both those bands, who are conveniently both on this list, I'm even going to make this a twofer. I'm even just going to say Leatherface and Hot Water Music came into my life both at around the same time when I was ready to be revved up by some post-hardcore music. Because, I mean, you know, it was like, for me, in terms of the biography, it was my first time living in another town. I dropped out of university. I was feeling kind of like a failure. I had no money. I had these literary ambitions. I was writing these weird short stories. And then I'd like actually go over to St. Mary's University campus to professors that I used to have in English before I dropped out and like slide them stories into their friggin' mailboxes. I mean, it was a weird kind of time where I had like a lot of frustrated ambitions in my life, but you know, they both landed there and they both resonated, I think, because quite frankly, the dudes in Hot Water Music, those dudes are basically our age. You know, they're like mid to late 40s. So when you see somebody around your age, you know, who's at the point where they're articulating, you know, experiences that you might know about or experiences that you might feel. Again, that was, you know, our whole thing growing up, Dan, when we were going to the all ages shows and stuff like this, except when you see like people who are actually making a full career out of it and making a full go of it, and, you know, sort of tapping into a wider tradition. So I guess I would just say in terms of both, I'll wind down my 2-for-1 segment here on both Leatherface and Hot Water Music, is that I saw Leatherface when they live in 2000 with a bunch of people.
Nice.
drove in a car from Halifax, went down to friggin' Worcester, Massachusetts, and just had the most awesome, ridiculous time. And I wrote about it even in the notes. But I'll just say, Frankie Stubbs is like the awesomest guy ever in music. He's this completely downtrodden, like he looks like a barnacle. He looks like something that's weathered to the bottom of a ship. And, you know, but when he's up on stage, he dances, he moves around, he does the Frankie Stubbs shuffle. And for the next 9 months, I go out to the bars and I get drunk enough and I'd end up like trying to impress somebody. And I'm like, I saw this band and there's this guy and he's so old, but he dances like this, right? I think, so yeah. But in all seriousness, I'll wind it down. Check out Mush first. You know, if you check out any of it, the rest, you know, start with Mush and go outward. And with Hot Water Music, I'll just say, start with their friggin' album that they put out this year. Start with Feel the Void, because I talked about that last episode. And I'm just gonna say, like, it's legitimately representative of anything else that it's like equally good to anything else they've ever put out in the past friggin' 25 years. So Shout out to both those bands, Dan. And now I'm gonna let you talk a bit, dude.
All right. I've got to say, Mush is one of my all-time favorite albums.
God Almighty, and
It's
it's just like it just yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
you know,
That's
and I know, and I hope anyone listening to this makes
it's
it worth their time to check it out.
it's one of those pieces of music I've gone through multiple copies of.
I can't even fathom like what my
Yeah,
life would be like having not experienced that. To be honest with you.
yeah.
And dude, just in keeping with where we kind of end up last time, let's do our top three. And I'm
Okay,
going to
yeah, we'll
tell
do
you,
our top three.
and I'll tell you,
That's
man, I've hit my top three.
yeah.
So why
I've
don't
got
you?
yeah. I yeah. One of them, my one. I'll have to try. One of them involves one of the ones that's going to get cut for time. There's a little story that I'll
Why
have to
don't
put
you?
in the notes. But anyways,
Why don't you just pick one of them? It doesn't even have to
well,
be the
no,
next
I
one.
think the one that's most important to talk, I think, is probably one of the biggest ones I can think of is just yeah, the number 3 on the list, the one you alluded to, which is
Thank
Submission
you.
Hold, formerly Insult to
I'm
Injury,
glad. I'm glad we get to include
who
that.
just
Yeah.
this band, it's wild when I think of it that like there was just this little pocket of time before the internet totally took roots as a thing where they were like this
Where
like
so sorry, are they from Calgary or where are they
no,
from,
they're
dude?
from here's the okay. So Submission Hold they're from Vancouver. Their
Okay.
singer's from Fredericton.
What?
Their singer's dad was one of the vice principals at FHS for the
What?
longest
I
time.
had no friggin'
And
idea. All this
used to
time, I had no
come
friggin'
would like
idea.
come to visit Fredericton every once in a while and kind of recruited some of like the older like M&T Deli like the punks that used to hang out at M&T
M&T,
Deli
sorry,
like
Fredericton
in the
Institution,
90s.
M&T
Some
Deli
of
was
them kind
next.
of got like convinced to go out west and join the same general kind of community that they were part of in Vancouver. That was just like those were all the folks that were just a little bit older than me that I kind of just looked up to in
So tell
awe.
me more. So tell me
But
more
like,
about this
anyways, so
community aspect, dude.
yeah, so their singer's dad,
Yes.
vice principal at the high school, and before they ever came out to play shows, every once in a while you'd see her show up at like a bigger show in Fredericton. It can coincide. It was like near a holiday when she would be back to visit, and people would whisper about, Mr. So and So's daughter, the
I
anarchist from
had no
Vancouver.
friggin' idea. This
And
is like
like,
old. This is
and
like
you see like
older
this woman with
person's
a blue mohawk
knowledge.
at like a King Apparatus show at at like the student union building, and a couple people would whisper like, "That's Mr.
You're blowing my mind right now, Dan. This is nuts.
So."
Anyway,
But like the first time they came to Fredericton as a band, it was when they were still called Insult to Injury, and they had a slightly different lineup. But the two sort of core members are Jen Throw Up, the vocalist, and Andy, the bassist, who is also her husband.
okay.
And then they originally had a guitarist named Jay Fliss in the band who did this tattoo that I have on my arm right here.
What? Man, this is serious stuff. You got a
Who's like,
tattoo from
after he left the
Submission
band,
Hold.
he was in the lineup that came to Fredericton and spent a week in Fredericton the first time they came because Jen was hanging out with her parents.
Can I
And
just
just like
ask, are they
all these
like
dudes, it's like them and their roadie, who's this guy Jason, who owns a great record store in Victoria. If you're ever in Victoria, go to Supreme Echo Records. As Jason Flower, who runs that, was roadieing for them, and they would all just show up in Molly's Cafe because they were like, "This is where the locals hang out, I guess." And they're like, "Hey, you're in that band from Vancouver that's playing on the weekend." I'm like, "Yep." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, you're the locals, huh?" "Yep." And then they finally played, and they were just like, to me, like they were like nothing I'd ever seen in Fredericton before. And like I say in my show notes, seeing them play made me want to find people to start a band with that could open for them the next time they came through town, because I figured they were going to come through again because of the certain members' familial connections.
Did that end up happening, Dan?
Well, it did. That band became Fun with Chainsaws, who were
there we go.
Not very good, but we had fun.
No, that Fun with Chainsaw was awesome, man.
Our final show,
yeah.
which was literally the night before I left to go to move to Alberta. We finally got to open for them. which was the next time they came through town. But like I'd written letters to them a couple times during that time, and like some of the Fredericton people that had moved out there to hang out with them had come back and had all these stories about like, just stuff that blew my mind. Like just talking about like going to see all these cool bands, like, some band from like Amsterdam flew over and played in their basement. And like, just stuff like that I was like,
Makes
and
you
just
want to
this
get
whole
out on
like
the
really,
road a bit.
just really cool, interesting
Yeah.
community that built up around them that, also in the show notes, I say that like when I moved out to the West Coast myself, there was an entire subset of my friends that were people that had all sort of moved there because they heard this cool band was from there and like stayed on their couch for a little while to kind of get their bearings. Like they had this house on East First Street in Vancouver that was like, yeah, like they would have bands from all over the world playing in their basement. Like that's just like, if this cool kind of underground band was passing through town, they would play there and just like pass a hat around. And that would be their one stop for Vancouver.
So
like
I don't know why this matters to me. And it doesn't even matter to me. It's just more like to contextualize it. So these like vegan, like straight edge,
kind of like,
what kind of
some of them and some of the people in the band were sober but not straight edge, but it's like kind of like vegan, like anarchists. They were really into like garlic.
That kind of thing,
like,
right?
All perfect it was for like, you can like
they might have like the that book about like
it's like
how to hop a train and travel through the United States.
Exactly, like it's like that sort of, but like the more sort of like positive, interesting side of that whole scene just before the internet became a thing. Submission Hold were like the ones, one of those folks that just like
before the
traveled all, like all around North America and like all around Europe and stuff. And they just like, you'd go to a town and you'd see somebody with a Submission Hold patch on their like backpack. And you'd be like, hey, those people know cool people that I know. I could probably say hi to them and be like, hey, that's my friend, that's that band, this band that I know, that's come to play my, I've hung out and talked with and stuff. And it's just like, yeah, there's this whole community that kind of built up around them. And their singer and bassist kind of were almost like the de facto, like adoptive parents of this entire little scene.
Despite the fact that at the time they would have only been in like their early or mid 20s themselves.
Or like,
right?
I think they were probably like maybe like at this point, I think they were both in their 30s. Like by the time I moved out to the West Coast, but when they came, the first couple times I saw them, they probably were like in their mid 20s. But like other places I lived after I moved away from Fredericton, they would always come through town and play really cool shows with really cool bands. And like if I was playing in a band, I'd try to get on those shows. And like they were just kind of like the focal point of this entire like just era of the scene. Like there's a big show that they played in Victoria when I lived there that somebody videotaped and then like just like dumped a bunch of copies of it home and sold. But like when you look through the crowd of this show that they played to like, it was, I think there were maybe 300 people there, but it was people I knew literally from coast to coast that were all just like, oh shit, Submission Hold's playing. We've got to see this big show with them and these like, I think it was like a couple bands from California and a band from Europe or something. But like they were the reason why all these bands were coming through there. And like the two songs that I picked were both off of the last demo that they put out before they signed to Ebullition Records. I don't know if you remember Ebullition at all.
I totally do, man. They put out they were like, okay, you remember Phil Clark and Distro?
Yes, Phil Clark's Phil Clark's distro that he had.
Right. But no, man, but that's how like I got like Ebullition like whatever 5, one of the ones that came with a record. And I'm like, holy shit, this has fucking Shotmaker on it. This has like Ass Factor 4. This has like all of this really tight, as you say, just free internet, heavy ass, wild, hardcore. Most of it's from the US, but Ebullition Records, man. That's some dope ass.
They were, I think they were the first Canadian band to put out a full length on Ebullition that I remember. And they put out a couple albums there, but the two songs that I chose were from their last demo because they were kind of they really kind of there was a point where their sound really kind of expanded. Like they started adding, like they had like a flautist that would tour with them, and they had a violinist for some songs as well,
That's
and like
great. So there
yeah,
were
just like
broken
additional
social scene.
instrumentation like that,
There were
and
broken
like
social scene before broken social scene.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
they and yeah, like for really big shows, like when you'd see them around like Vancouver and Victoria, for really big shows, they'd have like all the extra musicians there. And like this Progress cassette was like the first time they really started adding that aspect to things. And it was like when they started to make the leap. Like there was a little while where like if you had asked me who's the Canadian Fugazi, just in terms of like impact and like, you know, trying to like live their ethic and like, you know, really kind of like getting out there.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
That
also
no,
really like getting out there and like, you know,
that's
kind of like that's who I would say it would be Submission Hold.
that is a friggin' awesome comparison. And the whole like, yeah, I'm just gonna build my own means of sort of putting this out, distributing it, and living in such a way that
Exactly.
this is what I live, and it's maybe at the exclusion of some other things, but it's at
Yeah.
the benefit of so many other things. Man, that is sick. I'm
Mhm.
just like, I just remember, so prior to all of that, which you just described, which is friggin' awesome. My memory had basically been limited to like a mental kind of montage of like them just in St. Charbel's, like on the floor because there was no
Yeah.
friggin' stage in that place,
Yeah.
and just wah, just throwing it down and just like
Yeah.
standing back, just going like, whoa, this is like you kind of peel back a little bit, like this is friggin' intense and also weird and also very cool. Did
Yeah.
that? Did the singer? Did she have like dreadlocks in that
She
era?
had like I think little like braids. She might have had dreadlocks, kind of like a little like dreadlock mohawk thing as well at one
Okay,
point.
okay. It's completely beside the point.
You can
I try
oh,
with the yeah.
if you ever see the movie, have you? I'm sure you're familiar with the movie Rumble in the Bronx.
I'm friggin' ashamed to say not.
Okay, the Jackie Chan movie Rumble in the Bronx. It was filmed in Vancouver in the mid '90s.
I am ashamed.
Um,
I'm even more ashamed to say
okay.
not. I'm
Anyways,
gonna have to look that
but
up.
it's
That's
Vancouver as a stand-in for New York, and there's a scene where this
yeah.
hovercraft is crashing onto like a beach. I think it's probably like out in like Kitsilano or something. But you see like a woman's like a ton of tattoo. Oh yeah, that's another thing about Submission Hold is uh their singer was also like a movie extra and TV extra in Vancouver for a long time that ended up being like a featured non-speaking character on the show Neon Rider
What?
at one point.
Man, I
And
can't submission hold. We may as well
yeah,
just call this
and
the
like
submission hold
had
episode,
told
man.
stories about
I'm
like,
like,
you know, they would have like real life BC politicians come on to do guest spots
oh
or like
God,
do like
please tell
guest roles,
me.
and they'd see
Yeah.
the extras, and like they thought they were actual like homeless people. Meanwhile, they were people that were just like, yeah, like working non-speaking parts on the show, and they would just kind of like, it's okay, dear. But yeah, in Rumble in the Bronx, in the scene where the hovercraft crashes on the beach, you can see Jen, the singer from Submission Hold, jumping out of the way. Like if you look close enough. And also their bassist Andy Healy is a great writer. He did a zine called I'm Johnny and I Don't Give a Fuck that started out as just kind of like little like comedic, like autobiographical shorter stories.
Was that circulating in Fredericton when they were playing
Yeah, there would
shows
have been
at
some
all?
copies. It was like one of like the
Okay,
little
I
tiny
think I may
sized
have a
zines.
vague recollection of that.
But
Yeah,
he did
yeah.
one issue. He worked his way up to, there was one issue, I think it was like issue 5 or issue 6, that was basically like a 200 or so page novel that was like Kurt Vonnegut style magical realism, retelling the story of like just a tour from hell that they had up and down the West Coast, where just everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. But it was
Huh.
just his retelling, yeah, just sort of his sort of theory of like, you know, what otherworldly forces are at play, I guess you could say.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it was just
See,
incredibly entertaining. And it's like, I don't know if he ever really like wrote much beyond that, but it was one of those things that just that one thing was like one of my favorite Canadian novels.
I guess what you
Like
say,
the
Dan,
early aughts.
on the way on that, for me, that's like the most awesome possible way to
Yeah.
go out. But I will just say, like what you just sort of referred to as sort of contextualizing this within like the wider friggin' indie culture narrative, right? Like, in terms of the zines, in terms of, traveling to see shows, in terms of, all of the people working, shitty
Mhm.
service industry jobs to either be in a band or go see a band. I mean, I think, if you've ever committed yourself to having, those kinds of experiences, I just think everything you just said about Submission Hold, because I mean, they weren't the only band out there, going about business in that kind of way. But in terms of something that's representative of something, oh man, I'm so okay. My name's Matt, and I'm out. I'm
Hi,
out.
I'm Dan. This is Henry. He just decided to pop into frame for a bit after barking earlier. I guess we're out.
Henry. Okay, this is like the only other thing I'm going to add before I hit the end of the thing is the next scheduled episode of this would be January 1st, which is 2 weeks from today. Do you want to? We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you want to do like a holiday time version of this? Do you care? I mean,
Yeah, we could do it. We could do one January 1st.
Yeah. All right.
Or like, or no,
Yeah,
I mean, I guess I've got the week off before that too.
Okay, no,
Like
man.
I've got plans kind of like the middle of the week is kind of a little bit full, but I've got that whole week off between Christmas and New Year's. So
I'm writing. I'm giving myself a task. I'm giving myself a narrative task. I'm gonna try and write as much of this bizarre, friggin' satirical, friggin' noir pulp novel with lots of violence and 0 cents that I'm gonna try and ram into the last week. I'm gonna, like. They got the 3-day novel writing contest. Arsenal Pulp Press does.
nice.
And they do it like the Labor Day weekend. Yeah. I'm just going to crash it and just do my own version of that. I don't have the kids. I don't have January 1st, it'll just be like, all right, moving into the new year.
All right, let's do January. Yeah,
let's do that. January 1st, the first day of 2020. So, valued listeners, please be assured that this is on the way. And Dan, I'm enjoying this, man. I just
me too.
Okay. Henry, dude, I'm enjoying this. I would go at this point. It would almost be worth it to go upstairs and get my little Chihuahua terrier dog and just hold them up so they could not recognize each other, but it would still be cute. But that'll be maybe for the January 1st episode.
All right. Sounds good.
It's been a pleasure, dude. Thanks everybody who's chosen to listen. Take care and hope you have an awesome holiday.
All right. Great.
Bye.
Bye.